A very good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you are joining from. Welcome to this online live panel discussion on making the employee selection process bias-proof as a part of the weekly series called as Inspire for Impact from Dimension 3. We are very fortunate to have three very valued guests as panel members today, and we definitely hope to go home with valuable insights from them. My name is Shri Vallabh Kulkarni, and I'm the co-founder of Dimension 3 Global Solutions, and along with me is Hema. Hema is also the co-founder of Dimension 3. And Dimension 3 conducts these weekly series of talks, live panel discussions called as Inspire for Impact. And today's session on making the selection process bias-proof is a part of that. I want to start with a little hypothetical story, and this is very hypothetical. Let's let's assume that a group of people decide to start an organization, start a company. Let's say hypothetically an automobile company in some rural, far-flung part of the country, and they start the factory and they begin their hiring process. They start their selections, and as they start, obviously the most tangible and most accessible talent pool is from around the places, the villages around where they have set up the factory. So they start recruiting people for the factory. These are technicians, supervisors, and managers, and all kind of machine operators. Everybody, they start recruiting people, and the organization grows. But after 2 3 years, the demographics of the organization is looks something like this. Most of the people working in this organization are men, and in fact, all of the people working for this organization are men, and all the employees are from the nearby vicinity, which means that people live within about 5 to 7 kilometers radius from where the company is situated. And then all of them, without exception, maybe one or two exceptions here, but 99% of the people speak the same language. So that's about 3 years. And at this 3 years juncture, the company continues to grow and people continue hiring. And whenever they start hiring, it becomes a matter of practice. It becomes an automatic kind of way of things where people start recruiting those people who fit the employees, those who fit into the criteria that I just described. Which means after 10 years, the organization has men from the local areas, very few or no women working for the company, and people speak the same language. Now it's been 10 years. In this 10 to 12 years, there has been a lot of development around this organization. There are new settlements that have come up. The rural places have become urban. There are new malls, multiplexes. Everything has the entire topography or the geography has changed in these many years. And the organization, however, continues its practice of hiring people unconsciously, unknowingly, only those people who fit into this boundary or this structure of criteria. Now, what happens to this organization in terms of its success and performance at this juncture? Maybe it worked during those times when the organization started, but what's the guarantee that the organization will grow and prosper today with these changes? And a large part of who we end up as an organization depends and is very strongly related to. Research says that it's very strongly related to the kind of hiring and selections that we do in the organization. And many times when we do not hire based on when we do not hire people based on those experiences that we've not had, then we end up making unconscious decisions and many times even conscious decisions of hiring people who fit a particular criteria, and that impacts the organizational culture and performance. A McKinsey report has shown that organizations are 33% more successful and they perform better when the organization are diverse. In today's world, can you imagine this particular factory, this organization, having men speaking a certain language, belonging to a certain geographical territory only? How much would you bet on the success of the organization? And success, or what you reap is what you sow. And the seeds of organizational culture are sown at the very beginning when recruitment happens, when hiring happens. And world over, research has proven
high performing individuals that might end up all looking kind of similar. I want to check back in. Shri, have you been able to dial back in?
yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Perfect, perfect. Sorry, everybody. I think there was some network issues, but we are back on track. So I was saying that and thank you so much, M, for taking over while I was away, and I was saying that the seeds of an organization culture and its longevity are sown during the hiring process itself. And today's discussion is broadly around that. And I think while I was away, I think M has taken over, but I would still want to take a minute to introduce our panel of eminent speakers today. So we have, of course, I'll start with M. M. Roblin is a Canadian citizen, but has spent a lot of time in Beijing, China, and she is known as an inclusion artist. She creates experiences for inclusion and spent a lot of time creating and delivering insights to various organizations, various individuals with more than 15 years of passionate experience. And she's worked with a number of Fortune 500 companies across Asia Pacific. And we are in fact delighted to have you, M, here. No person better than you, from elsewhere who can also talk from an Asia Pacific perspective, which would be a great which would be great to hear in terms of perspectives from your side. And she's done a lot of work in terms of women empowerment and upliftment during her stint in China, and she's joining us today from Bali, Indonesia. And thanks for taking the trouble, M, for joining us. Thank you so much.
So happy to be here. Hi.
Along with M, we have Ranganath, fondly called as Ranga in the corporate circles. And I think, Ranga, how do I really introduce you? He's got such an impressive resume in terms of the kind of work and experience he has. Ranga is currently working with Shriram Bioseeds, and prior to that, he has worked with companies like Asian Paints, Hindustan Coca-Cola, Idea Cellular, and he's very passionate. And whenever I speak to Ranga, I have seen so much of passion in his voice, in the way he brings in topics. He is very well known and respected in the fraternity for the kind of ideas and insights he brings in. A number of accomplishments, and I've seen very few people from the HR domain with a Six Sigma certification, and Ranga is one of them, and he is a Six Sigma green belt. Along with that, he from Thomas Assessment, he is a certified personal profile analyst, and from the ASL Academy, he has been certified as a manager, as performance enabler, and a number of accomplishments to his credit, and number of awards. He was awarded as one of the 100 HR Super Achievers in 2017 and 101 HR Super Achievers in 2018. So continuously for 2 years, and also member of prestigious institutions. And then we have Neelam. Neelam is working as the Vice President L&D at Big Basket, and she has over 18 years of work experience. Prior to Big Basket, she was at Flipkart and Max Healthcare, Narayana Hospital, NH Hospitals, and NIIT. And she has a lot of passion and in making the shift from creating mundane learning experiences to making them more as business solutions and having a very strong operational and business impact rather than a check mark learning activity, and with very strong focus on core business. She's been instrumental in setting up a number of learning divisions wherever she has worked with functional expertise, OD, DNA, and DNA focus. She also has done a lot of work on diversity and inclusion, coaching, and behavioral learning. So thank you very much, everybody. Welcome once more for joining us on this panel. So for the benefit of all the audience, I would just like to explain to you how the entire process will flow. This is going to be a discussion between the panelists. Having said that, it is also open for everyone to ask questions. While we will leave some time in the end, about 20-25 minutes to half an hour will be devoted for questions. So please do keep your questions ready for that time. But at the same time, if you have questions midway, please feel do free to write your questions on the chat window. I do hope that you can see the chat window, and if you have questions, you can just say that I have a question, or you can type in a question. Hema or I will take your questions, or we will open the audio and video lines for you to interact with the panel members during the discussion. So there's no time. While there is a time for Q&A in the end, in between, if there's any question that needs attention, feel free to write in the chat window. Just to ensure that everyone is aware of the technologies, can I just request everyone to just write in a hi in the chat so that we know that you are able to find the chat. Yeah, and whenever you chat, make it to everybody, not one single person. Yeah, it should be everyone. Great. Fantastic. Thanks for your responses. So I know now that almost everyone has an access to chat window. If you are on video, there's no need. You can block your video right now. But when you're asking questions, we may also open the video and audio for you. All right. On that note, let's start. I was talking to you about the story of the factory. It might sound unreal. It might sound that, hey, what's he talking about? But trust me, based on my own personal experiences, I have 25 plus years of work experience, and in these many years, I have seen quite a few organizations where you have people only belonging to a certain language. A majority of the people, employees working in the company, who speak a similar language or who belong to a certain community or certain geography, and that's it. And do these organizations grow? Maybe to an extent, but I have seen that if organizations do not take the necessary efforts to make themselves diverse or to make themselves diverse, then success is very limited. And as I was telling earlier, the McKinsey report, diversity has a very strong connection to business success and business organization culture. So we'll talk a lot about this as we go on. So Ranga, let me open up the discussion with a quick question to you. Thank you again once more for joining us. You come with so many years of work experience across organizations, and now you are with Sriram. So my question to you would be, what is a typical selection process employed in your organization or in your industry? And what are the merits and demerits of such processes in contrast or in comparison to some other selection processes? Let's start the discussion with this question. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Srivallabha, for giving such a wonderful opportunity. And see, guys, as you all know that, employee selection is a process of putting right man, right job, as Srivallabha rightly put up already. So it is a process of matching organizational requirement with the skills and qualification of the people, which you all aware. And coming to me, if you ask me my experience, typically, as I work with the companies from different organizations, different segments like manufacturing, FMCG, IT, ITES, engineering, and now I'm with agriculture since last 2.5 years. So I have seen the process from in a conventional to unconventional mode. In fact, I'm also sometime back put some thoughts. If you ask me, beginning of my career, I've seen the process like spinning up applications. A lot of people apply through post, people come to office and hand over the reception, and again going through all the profiles, segment in different segments like chemical engineering, engineering also three different processes, administration, HR, commercial. It's a huge job if you ask me. I don't know how many people really got experience in such kind of recruitment process. I still remember I used to keep separate box files in each and every segment to keep up all the resumes and shortlist based on the criteria, all kind of thing. And having said that, now if you can see the recent, the recruitment process, lot of transformations have been done from the conventional to unconventional thought process. Today, if you ask me, in my company hiring process, yes, we do different kinds of selection process. Start with screening of shortlisting profile. The psychometric testing depends on because we hire a lot of doctorates, intellectual properties, because ours is the agriculture industry. We have a R&D research and development is there, biotechnology is there. So we hire people from different segments like doctorates and PhDs. So definitely, I would like to understand their mindset. What kind of mindfulness they're coming into organization. Apart from the qualification, as you said, the psychometric testing, ability to aptitude test for the frontline people, and personality profiling, second kind of leadership profile, as well as sales people and marketing people, and some of the youngsters. Why will hiring for a campus recruitment? Of course, we do presentations and group exercises. So these are the combination of, if you ask me, Srivallabh, and I don't have any such one kind of process where I want to implement in the overall, because I come with a different organizations and has to manage entire organization different levels. I have to tailorize. I need to customize for each and every process for different levels. So that's a kind of experience in I come up. I think let us open for the other questions to other people. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. And obviously, I mean, it goes without saying that the selection funnel that is there, the funnel would look different for different levels and the different functions and different roles. But having said that, some industries like yours would probably rely heavily on the academics or the since there would be scientists, since there would be agriculturalists, etc. So there's a lot of scientific knowledge that is required, irrespective, even if you're in a managerial role. So that was the reason why, in fact, I wanted to ask you. And in contrast, going to Neelam. Neelam, how would the hiring processes in general, if I were to generalize, as I said, it would be different for different functions and roles. For an organization like Big Basket, how would the hiring process or selection process differ compared to traditional methods or traditional norms that have been followed in terms of selection?
So, Srivallabh, in terms of hiring, most of our people that we hire, and I think the bottom of the pyramid is very heavy for us. Yeah. And that's why we have a lot of people who work on the field and on the, on the street for us. And the way our hiring process differs from there is that we've actually tried to not bring in some biases, right? I think one thing that we understood as an organization is that there will be biases, right? Conscious, unconscious, gender biases, religion biases, we are not like me kind of biases will be there. And we wanted to know what biases can be, right? So in terms of leaders who are hiring or for the hiring team, and when we talk about feet on field, which we hire probably about 1,000 or 1,500 a month, we've got something called as a hiring protocol. Now that hiring protocol is developed keeping in mind the prototype of the person that we want to hire. So if I want to hire a Srivallabh and he's got a role of somebody who will ensure that customer delight is there, then we would make a prototype. What's the angst of a Srivallabh role? What makes this role more successful? What makes Srivallabh's roles unsuccessful? All right, what are the challenges that this role will have? And based on that, you will come out with 2-3 things that you want this role to achieve. All right. So how do I give an examples? For example, for my quality person, eye for detail for color is very important because they do sorting of fruits and ensuring that the right thing is going in the right packet. And it's very important that somebody who's in fruits and vegetables is able to see a small spot also in the vegetables, so that the customer is not bothered by it. Now for that, I will have certain parameters as to what makes this person, why will we hire him, why will we not hire him. For example, a delivery boy, basic maths is important. All right. So I may like this guy because I'm also from probably Karnataka. He's also from Karnataka. And I really like this guy. He's well groomed. He's very nice. But I will ask those 3 questions to him. So I will ask him that I'm giving you, you go to a customer's home, you've got about 1 kg tomatoes, and the customer says, I don't want 5 of them. You wait, it comes to about half a kg. The tomatoes are for 39 rupees. Tell me how much will you put as a refund in the customer's wallet, right? The moment he does not answer that question or says, I'm sorry, I don't know, that is one place wherein you will, you'll not have your bias. You may have liked him for various reasons, but you will say, all right, so then you will not go for the delivery team. I'll put you in the packing team, right? So by defining what is the prototype of the role that you want, at least for the larger roles, right, is one way that we have, we've been able to, I will not, as I said, not eliminate, but minimize biases to a large extent. And then there are many examples. We've done it for a lot of roles. So there are roles wherein we want them to have P&L knowledge. And we also have wherein, the buying and the merchandising team or other teams come back saying that we need field knowledge. And it's very important. This guy is very good. And we say, all right, these are the 5 things that he needs to know. And can we have somebody from tech team also interview him on one of these things? And let's see how does he sees this person. So I think putting in a lot of processes by ensuring what does this person want, and then going ahead has helped us a lot in terms of diversifying our workforce.
Great, and that's a good learning in itself. In terms of the spots and the colors that you were speaking about. Just for my curiosity, Neelam, the feet on the field, that is your delivery boys, etc. What is the ratio in terms of, are they all outsourced or are they all full-time employees? Generally, how does it happen?
So it depends, Srivala. For example, in a city like Ahmedabad, we can go completely off-role, right? Okay. But in a city like Mumbai or a Kolkata or Maharashtra, we will have an off-role and an on-role. So it depends on how easy are we able to get what kind of people. So there is no rule or a method or a formula for it. It depends on the kind of workforce that's available. Easily available.
Sure. The reason I ask is that is to know in terms of how much of to what extent is the big basket talent acquisition team involved in the hiring of these people, and if there are external agencies who hire, then how do we take care of training them, and beyond the job descriptions and competencies, specifically on the part of bias, right? How do you ensure that there is bias is given the appropriate attention as far as hiring is concerned when you do it off-road?
So in terms of off-road, we follow the same formula in the sense that we certify their trainers, their HR, and anyways, I think before the person comes in, right, he anyway goes through the HR and the training team.
Right.
So which means he will, even if you've had about a week's training with your partner that you are with, as an entrepreneur or as a CPO, you will still come across and meet our people. So there is some level of filter that still happens, right? So one bias that we, and I think we don't kill all biases. We eliminate biases that are creating issues for you. So one thing that we believe, Srivala, is that bias is not such a bad thing.
True.
Right? You should be, I think, putting it into action and then magnifying it and glorifying it and ensuring that everybody is biased as you are is probably something that we want to eliminate, right? So a bias probably in a particular region, you have people only speaking one language. You have people only from one part of the state. You have people only from one group of the community is something that we want to not have.
Absolutely.
Right? So the fact that we don't want to have everybody from the same community itself brings diversity to us.
True. And this is an important point that I want to emphasize to all the people who are listening, is that unfortunately many a times people including consultants who, like me, who are in the business, there is a bad name given to bias, bias is not bad. Bias is inherent. Bias exists in all of us. It's not as much about bias, because if you see, 99.9% of our decisions on a day-to-day basis are unconscious, and it said that we make about 3,500 decisions per day, and we can, at any given point of time, we can process only about 40 bits of data per second or per moment, whereas we are bombarded with 11 million bits of data. So from that perspective, most of our decisions are unconscious. So bias inherently by itself is not bad, but what is bad is if you're not conscious about the impact of some of these unconscious biases. So I'd like to, before I go to M, I'd like to quickly for a minute or so go back to Ranganath, check from your perspective. Now, Big Basket is a new age industry, if I may. But you have also worked with a lot of, I would say, traditional industries, be it FMCG or agriculture, etc. What's your take on the role bias plays in the entire selection process?
Yeah, Vallabh, absolutely. I also partially agree with Neelam on the bias. Bias is not a bad word. First of all, what unconscious bias means in recruitment, in the hiring and the hiring process. See, unconscious bias happens when you form an opinion about the candidate. See, normally what will happen when the moment we call the candidates, by seeing the way of body language, the way they come up, the way they dress up, you may have some kind of gut feel. Oh, out of 10 people, these two guys may come in. These two guys may clear and take the process. So that is the one kind of opinion normally we tend to form. Bias solely, the first impression. They call first impression. You may call a bias or impression, whatever it may be. Or when you prepare one candidate over the other, simply because of the first one seems to be someone you would easily get along with him. See, these are all so many things. It will impact on the bias. What I would see personally, if you ask me in bias, see, reference also is a bias, if you ask me. See, I work within FMCG and as well as in telecom industries. Telecom 2006 to 2014, I was there. The telecom is very boon. How to get the people from different industries? They were, if you ask me, they were telecom companies. Now we have, after consolidation, 3 or 4 are there. Previously, we have 13 telecom players are there. So huge competition. If the sales guy going out for 1 hour, definitely you'll get with 4 hours. So what I'm trying to say here, most of the time in typical sales driven organizations, the sales head or a business head will come back with HR saying that, hey Ranga, why don't you call this candidate? I worked with him earlier. Okay, why don't you call him? Okay, you call him first, let us see. That means 50% of the opinion already made by the business head, yes, I want to take this candidate. That means based on his previous experience, as he worked with him or she has worked with him, so definitely he has seen some kind of good merits from the particular candidate. So he also feels that, yes, let me bring the candidate. So definitely bias will have a different, place will different take place. It depends on the function or depends on the people. And what I would say that here, because of we are talking about more on bias, just first of all, I just want to put one interesting insight. How many people will feel that talent acquisition is also a sales job? Okay, we always feel that sales is something different from the product selling, but I don't agree with on that aspect. I always feel that talent acquisition, selling a job, is also sales, because if you want to buy a product, for example, iPhone is a product. So why we want to buy iPhone compared to other products? Because iPhone have a different feature, different shelf life. There are so many kind of things to want to select. Whereas if you want to sell a job, a particular job, can any talent acquisition head or HR head can give any guarantee about the particular job? Can you give any guarantee about how much of increment can I get next year? Anybody can give a confirmation or a commitment after how many years I'll get a promotion in the organization? Can we give, you will be stay with the company for minimum 3 years? I can't give any of all these things, but still I have to sell a job. That means the kind of process, the kind of understanding about the role and identifying the right person, the right resource, the different geographies, understanding the business dynamics will play a very vital role. So having said that, I just want to put some essential to reduce unconscious bias. See, sometimes conscious, unconscious will always play, as Srivallabh and Neelam rightly said. But unconscious bias will always play some different role in the recruitment process. See, for example, while assessing the candidate, we have some kind of biasness will come. And check your job description carefully while doing the job description, and evaluate every CV in the same way. Stick with a script in the interview process, and use a diverse interview panel. Okay. For example, if you are using the same panel for every time, you will get to know what kind of people you are going to come in. So that's the reason today industries also, they're bringing the diversified people into the organization. They're including, for example, telecom guy, they want to go back to FMCG. FMCG guy, they want to come to engineering kind of thing. So diversification always will play a vital role in the entire selection process. And I think these are the kind of things I just want to share with you, Vallabh. Bias, yes, it's a very it's a positive note. Having said that, we also need to understand what kind of bias you want to getting into the system, and how HR can able to control the bias, which also play very vital role. I just want to give a classic example here. I always believe that this is the example how finance people is a gatekeeper for all financial transactions. In such a way, HR, talent acquisition, is a gatekeeper for all the people process. So I always believe that the talent acquisition guy or a HR guy should have the right conviction, the right kind of thought process, which bias is a good to the organization, which bias is not good for the organization. I think we need to have a thin line. Then only that comes to a very different thought process in the entire bias process.
Sure, sure, and thanks for those insights. Now, bias inherently, we all know it's there, and many times it's not about whether it's good or bad, but it's about the impact that it has. One aspect is that bias is not limited to a certain group of people or certain geography. It's universal. It's global, and we have M on board here. So M, with your many years of work and experience living and working in countries like Canada and China, what is your take on how bias plays out in different parts of the world? In India, it's generally gender is the biggest thing in India, like the United States. One is gender. Second, right now it's the age that's coming up, and also sometimes regional bias. People belong to a certain region, etc. So apart from that, I would like to hear from you at a global level. How does bias come in?
Yes, great. Thanks. I'd love to share. I hear somebody's got their.
Yes, I'll mute everybody. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Hang on. Yeah, I think since I muted everybody, even you got muted. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. First of all, I'm just really enjoying listening to the different perspectives that have been shared. I have to agree with Ranga, with what you just shared about, comparing sort of like a sales, like selling a job, and the similarities between talent acquisition. I think that's a great analogy because, it's like, good salespeople, they really understand their customers, and they really can and have put themselves in the shoes of the customer. And I think that's a really, really good talent acquisition folks to do the same thing. It's like, I often encourage, whether I'm working with a company or if an individual executives in the job market looking to shift companies or shift roles, I always encourage people, turn on all your senses and look at every experience and interaction you have with this company, because there's going to be somebody explaining to you the formalities of the job, but what's the culture of this company? Like, turn on all of your senses. What do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell? How do people in the office interact? Because all of that plays into the kind of experience that you want. And I encourage all of my clients to say, when you're entering into a company, it's like, they get to have you. It's not you get to work there. It's also, you're only one person and you're dedicate a chapter of your life to this company. So you better understand and really feel excited about the company, of the culture of this company. So I think your point is spot on. To come back to bias, and just to share a little bit about some of the differences between Canada and certain different markets in Asia. Canada is one of the most diverse countries in the world, and I grew up in urban Toronto. So, you know, Canada is a country that depends on immigration for our population. So I grew up alongside a lot of different immigrant families who are Canadian, but their parents and grandparents could be Indian from you know, Singapore, Taiwan, whatever. And so I think the awareness of and sensitivity to bias is very profound in Canada. I think people are also very sensitive. So in Canada, people tend to feel quite ashamed or guilty or sad when they discover that they have bias, because they feel bad about it, because they have a deep value system that says, I really believe everybody should be equal. And so when they find out that their behavior is limiting that, people feel really bad about it. And so there is this you know, with certain people, there is this tendency to pretend it's not there, you know, because it's hard it takes a lot of courage to deal with it. And so that's why, you know, I love, Neelam, what you were sharing about some of the things that you've been doing in your organization. Because in Canada, for example, it was back in the 1970s that there was research being done to explore the power of like blind auditions. So when we take names off of resumes, or when people audition for me or try, that we can't see them, so that we can find out how powerful our bias really, really is. And the crazy thing about bias that you have to understand is that we rationalize it. So even if we have awareness that it exists, we end up consciously rationalizing our decisions. I'll give you a simple example, maybe in a couple of minutes, because I veer away from the question at hand, and I'll come back to that example of how that plays out and can really, really impact how a team will make a decision. But you know, one of the most important things you can do is be really clear on what the criteria are for the job, and also the order of the criteria. So even if we decide for a particular job that, you know, these three things are the most important, for example, education background and the number of years of actual experience in a similar kind of role, like we might decide, okay, which of those are the most important and in what order, because that's going to really limit how that bias will play out. Because anytime another attribute creeps into a decision-making conversation, we can flag it. We're like, wait a second, that's not on our list. That, you know, they're 5 years of being off the grid and not working, that wasn't on our list. So let's not bring that into the conversation. It isn't relevant. Those are the kind of things you can do. I'll talk a little bit about, you know, the difference in China. I think in China, or in Asia, I would say, it's much more normal, like what Ranga was saying too, for people to, when they move companies, to have like, you know, followers. They have team members that travel with them to different organizations. I didn't see that nearly as much in Canada, and I've really learned that practice. And I think a lot of it is just the fast rate of change that is in these markets. And so if you're a leader in an organization and you're going to invest all that time and energy to grow your talent and build a trust-build relationship, it's so obvious to want to bring that person. So I don't know necessarily, in my experience, if I think that that wrong leaders do that very effectively. I think the question is, though, when we're in those different organizations and we're building teams, are we really looking at a whole range of candidates and looking at the big picture of how each candidate fits into the larger piece? So I think that's a conversation that happens a lot in Asia that wouldn't happen as much in North America. I think one other thing I'm going to say is that, you know, in Asia Pacific, especially in countries that are more homogeneous, right? So again, I described Toronto, which is like, there's a lot of diversity there, but in a city like Beijing, where I've been living, the capital of mainland China, it's like, it's not as diverse. So people will often ask me, you know, we have to consistently go back to talking about, well, why is diversity good? Because even on this call, you know, we've had references a few times to language. It's like, you know, of course we're going to hire people that all speak the same language, because if we start bringing in people that don't speak the same language, how is anything going to get done? And I think that is a really valid question. And I think it also indicates that shift that Ranga was saying from, a conventional way to an unconventional way. I might say it's from a traditional way to an innovative way, but I think it's the same idea, because the fact is, when you do have more diversity, you will slow things down. And India, I think China is similar, and a lot of different markets in Asia have traditionally been execution driven, or focused, and now we need to be innovative and we need to be creating. And so with that, I think, comes that valid question, because it's true, if you're pure executors and then you all speak different languages, things start to get really complicated, So I think that's definitely there. I'll pause there for now. I have one last thing that I will say. Yeah, I think diversity, how we understand diversity, definitely shows up differently across different places. So in Canada, if somebody's talking about diversity, we are almost always talking about gender. I think in the last couple of years, we are even not just talking about men and women, we're talking about transgender, we're also talking about, lesbian, gay, or sexual orientation, and a lot of other things, age, ethnicity, religion. But, I find in the hiring process in a lot of Asian markets, where bias can really play out is like education background. So somebody who went to an Ivy League school is like given a pass, even if so many of the other criteria on their resume really don't fit at all. If they went to a good school, they get a pass. So that kind of bias can really creep in, and the other way around. If they're an exceptionally qualified candidate, but they didn't go to a good school, then they're limited, even if it really doesn't have that much relevance for the job and they've been out of school for a long period of time. Also things like hometown, like where you grew up is really important. Whereas in the West, we're not as focused on that, but in certain markets in Asia, I find that can be a really, really big one. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Em, for those insights. And one aspect is Asian countries like China and India. We are broadly more of a communitarian culture than an individualistic culture compared to North America. And probably that would be, on a lighter note, the one reason why when managers move companies, even their team members, everybody goes around with them. And from a bias perspective, since you mentioned China, one thing I've seen in China is there is a great sense of fascination for foreigners there. So if M and I were to apply for a job, both being foreigners, the possibility of someone who is more of a fair-skinned person, fair-skinned foreigner, probably has a greater chance of landing up a job than someone who is a dark-skinned person like me. And this I've seen up front, and I don't know how much of it you have experienced, you've seen, M, but then that's something that is so true to China and to an extent even India. So Neelam, I would like to go to you and ask in terms of, let's talk about some specifics now. When I say specifics, what are some specific types of biases that crop up during the selection process, hiring process? We spoke about gender, we spoke about skin color, but specifically, what are some biases that creep in, and how does that have an impact on organizational demographics, on organizational, I would say, the making of an organization? How does that have an impact? So can we talk about some specific examples of biases that crop up either during the interview process or outside the interview process?
I think one of the most common is you are like me. So if I am, as M said, I am execution focused and you are also execution focused, there we are, right? If I have value of time and I am, my orientation towards time is very good and you're also like me, then you are in, right? What happens is, and this is very common, this is not something that that's a story. There are times when you find a person and his team exactly the same. They may have not known each other, but everybody will be a doer, right? Or everybody will be a thinker, right? Or everybody will be an innovator. I think so unconscious, why we call it unconscious bias also is because, you see, in my thought process, I want to build a diverse team. I understand that if I am a L&D head and very good with functional knowledge, I would want to have somebody with behavioral knowledge who can complement me. But what happens is that during the process, I don't realize that I end up doing that, right? I end up hiring somebody like me. Similarly, hiring from these schools. So is ISB or whatever is an IIT, kind of becomes very, very clearly. Some people have very strong gender bias, and like Em said, they rationalize it by saying that this work can only be done by men. And I can give you a very, very good example of this. So while we pick in our warehouses, this job primarily had belonged to men. And we've always had men in warehouses picking stuff, because you have to pick up a 10 kg atta or a 5 kg dal and all that stuff. And so the first time we said that we will have women in the warehouse, the resistance was so high that we have to put it on hold for some time. And that is when only one business leader from Pune said that I will do this experiment, Neelam. Let's go ahead and hire. And throughout the country, I could hear that there will be no productivity, there will be nothing, that they will tire themselves and all that stuff. And we went ahead and hired just 20 women. And we said that we will give them training. At that point, one of the biggest thing that we were fighting was attrition, which was very high. So every morning you come up and you see almost 20% people not being there, and then you have to close your slots because you can't pack orders today. And we went ahead and hired them. And believe me, for the first 2 months, the productivity was less. But what was good was there was no absenteeism, because feminine bring in predictability into your system. Women like coming on time, finishing on time and going on time. So that predictability came into the system, wherein the manager is not getting up every morning and thinking, oh my God, I don't have 20% people now, what do I do, right? So you have to understand that, and when this happened, all right, in 3 months, and believe me, in 3 months, I have data for this, they were as productive as men. In fact, one of them were more productive. So if the men were about 95 to 98% productive, they were about 100 to 102. Were there women who were less productive? Of course, they were, right? But they built time to build that stamina, right? So gender diversity is one thing that we had to really, really fight here. But once we said this, I think all biases went away. So once they started seeing that women are not only bringing productivity, but also bringing absenteeism and attrition to a very single digit, most of the warehouses at Big Basket today have almost 25% women. And we are wanting, and now we are thinking, oh my God, I can't hire women in, in night shift because of the government regulation. Oh God, that's such a failure. Why are they not helping us? But I think once you kill that bias with fact and data, all right, I think it takes on, and human mind is capable of comprehending what works for me, right? So that is why, so gender bias is one that I thought. You are like me. So, everybody in the team is running like headless chicken. There is nobody who's a thinker, is one of the other. School bias, the pedigree bias is one bias. State bias is one bias, which we have seen, wherein I come from Delhi, he comes from Delhi. To a large extent, surname bias or bias of the same caste that you are or the community that you belong to are certain very, very common biases that I've seen across. It's just not Big Basket. I think it's across that I've seen them. So the way we fought it, very honestly, is by acknowledging that forgive yourself for being biased. First, forgive yourself for being biased, right? There's nothing wrong that you've done. It's unconscious. And we do very beautiful workshops on working with pictures, working with colors, arts, wherein people come up with their biases, and then we talk about it. Where did I get it from? So most of the biases in Indian come from mythology, come from probably the way I was looked at, right? So like, for example, I keep on saying that we have a lot of stories of a good son in Indian mythology, but we have no story of a good husband, right? So living with your father and mother, right, not leaving them, abandoning them, is something that comes so naturally to all the men in India, right? But what do you mean by a good husband? Everybody will have a lived example experience of that. Somebody would say equality, somebody would say love, somebody would say trust, right? But when you ask what does a good son mean, they will have. So these are all biases. So the first thing that we have to do is that forgive yourself. And then we start the next day of the workshop, wherein we say, All right, now let's find out what do I have, and it is living in my, is that the adult data in here and now, or is it that that bias is coming because I've lived it and I know about it, or is that in my body somewhere, but I don't know where is it coming, probably coming from, as I say, mythology, from my parents, from whoever it is. So I think these are certain biases that we've been able to fight.
Sure, I think that's great, and I would like to come back later on the mythology piece and what you just now explained. I would like to really hear a little more about that in some time. But I see Sachin, you have raised your hand. Is there a question you want to ask or something, Sachin, or is it by mistake? Should I open the audio line for you, Sachin?
Yeah. If I'm allowed to ask
Yes,
question, I can.
Please,
ask
feel
right
free.
now.
Feel free. Please go ahead.
Hi. So I was listening to. Okay, so Shri Vallabh, I have faint memories that I would have met you in Bangalore sometime for some theatrical performance on diversity.
That's right. Black, white, and life in between.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe there we met.
Yeah.
So that's why I was curious about this thing. So maybe my HR experience has created some biases in myself. So I thought, let me spell it out, and maybe I'll get some clarifications. So as Ranga was mentioning that when in talent acquisition, we always say that uh, even TA is like a sales job where you have to perceive yourself that way. But somewhere, whenever I have looked at talent acquisition, I have always believed that instead of selling the opportunity, we have to position the opportunity in the right way, because I'm sure we all have got sold by someone at some point of life. And when the product comes at our house, then we suddenly realize that it was a waste of money, or maybe some lying in some corner without any use for the last 6 months. And that typically happens with employees when you sell the job, that after a few months, when they do their confirmation, or maybe after a few months of seeing the real life, they suddenly realize that, okay, this was not positioned, this was sold to me. And then in fact eventually the attrition happens. So somewhere maybe, and that's why whenever I would take sessions, so even I had L&D for one of the organizations, and whenever I take sessions, I tell them that don't sell the job, position the job in the right way, so that, and then you leave it up to the employee whether he wants to take it or just leave it off, because it's never always about filling up the positions. It's about actually giving the right candidate the right fitment rather.
So, is there a question here?
Yeah, the question here was that when we talk about references as biases, so don't we consider references as more of a strategic decision by the management rather than considering it as a bias? The reason I'm asking this is I have worked in one of the financial organizations, and there we would promote uh, uh, people to come by references because it was more to do with financial handling. And just in case if the person goes wrong, then we have someone to back to get the money back. So it was more of a strategic decision. But when we say that it may be a bias, maybe I would love to hear as to how do we take it, as a strategic decision or maybe a bias which is in our minds.
Sure. Who is this question for, Sachin? Is it for?
I think it was Renga who had raised
Yeah.
about bias. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I answer definitely, Sachin. Thanks for asking this question. I just want to answer your first question also. See, selling the job. You also mentioned that selling the job. Why I mentioned very particularly, because ultimately, unless the talent acquisition head who has the right frame of entire aspect and specification of the job, he cannot position the job in front of the candidate also. Today, we all need to treat our employees as the consumers, whether we agree or not. That's a fact. See, today in the new age of industries, I need to treat all my employees like a consumer. That means what kind of experience I'm creating each and every HR process. Start from the recruitment till exit. Entry to exit. Entry to exit, how HR can able to create an experience which really matters to the employees stay with organization. So like you say, stay, strive, which are the always three elements will play very bigger role. What I could say about the organization? Can I tell my friends to what kind of organization I'm saying is positive about the company? When I can stay with the organization, how can I advocate my stay with my colleagues of other across the other people? and you can strive. How do I strive my, the position what I joined the organization to accomplish my entire fully engaged with the organization? See, my only point of why I told you very clearly, selling is an objective, because you need to have the kind of fine tune that, the objective. Selling is not only salesman job. See, why I told you again, the selling is one of the component, one of the aspect of attribute, because while selling the job, you cannot give any kind of guarantee. See, today you know that today unfortunate situation has come up in the COVID-19. Now you tell me how many people are getting down the roads. Now any HR can give any guarantee on this process. So my only point of saying is that the kind of traits which we need to demonstrate during the process. Okay, I don't know whether I'm answering you or not. So that's what I'm sharing with you. And secondly, the point you're coming up, the bias. I said very clearly, bias is a positive trait. Yes, today most of the organizations are encouraging employee to reference. There are most of the companies also having a policy called employee referral policy, different levels. If I refer a lower level candidate, I can get some kind of some incentive. Higher candidate, some incentive. But we should have the proper policy in place. That means, for example, HR people are not part of the referral policy, and the current hiring manager is not part of the referral policy, and the current functional head is not part of the hiring policy. So what I'm trying to say that if any company will have the very structured employee referral policy, that would definitely impacting organization strategically and cost benefit analysis also. Instead of hiring everybody through consulting, instead of paying 10%, 12% or 15%, depends on the hierarchy. Definitely that I can inculcate the culture of creating employee referral policy, so that I can get the right kind of cultural fit guy in the organization. Because I'm working with an organization for more than 5-6 years. I know the culture, I know the values of the company, so that I can inculcate these are some of the traits to whom I'm going to refer in the organization. Okay, so some of the organizations, because of failing through employee referral, because of there is no proper guidelines, and again HR is a custodian. As I mentioned to you, how finance is the custodian for all financial transactions. Now, this is a classic example I always share with any of my sessions. For example, finance executive who is preparing the reimbursement bills of all the employees in the organization. If I, as a HR head, if I submit my bill without my boss's signature, immediately you can say that, sir, I cannot process your bill because your boss has not signed. He's an executive, understand? But in the same way, HR executive is a right to say that if anybody is deviating any process of HR process, of people process. So that is where the biggest challenge between the HR and as well as the other functions. HR should have the right kind of convictions. For example, some guy, sales head will come, hey Ranga, isko bulao yaar, kal bulao. Now you tell me how many people, how many talent acquisition guys, without knowing you, candidates are coming for interviews. I have a lot of experiences. When I'm working with telecom company, without knowing me, 10 people used to come for interviews. I used to get a call from reception, sir, आपके लिए कोई आया था. किसके लिए आया? Interview के लिए. They come for interview. Even I never scheduled. So what I'm trying to say that because there are so many processes are there, but how HR is strongly believing on the process and having the conviction, right conviction, then definitely that kind of process, that kind of organization will flee into the different leaps and bounds.
Thank you, Ranga. Thank you. And I'm a little mindful of our time here. It's about 5 now. And Sachin, I'd just like to add one single line to what to your question. In addition to what Ranga said, is probably the point of selling a job comes because today candidates are in a far better. Today candidates also make equal decision about joining a company or not joining a company compared
Absolutely.
to 10 years ago or not, which is why it becomes a selling thing. And when it comes to references and a bias, probably you were talking about references. Now referrals are one part. When it comes to references, as long as references are an addendum to our existing process and they validate or our observations of a candidate, I think to that extent references work well, because we never know what agenda is the person who's providing a reference for a candidate has in terms of positive or negative. So we might get very good references for someone who is not the right candidate, or bad references for someone who is actually a good candidate. So, but if those references are able to validate my observations as an interviewer, as a hiring manager, probably to that extent it works. Now, I want to shift gears and talk about the other side of the story. On one side is the bias that organizations and individuals demonstrate as interviewers. What about the candidates? Let's talk about the candidate experience perspective. Many times during the interview process, bias can also impact candidate experience negatively, right? The kind of questions we ask, the kind of statements that an interviewer makes during an interview, etc. So quickly, I'll jump to M. M, what do you think? How important is candidate experience during an interview, and why is it important for an interviewer to be mindful about their biases in order to ensure a positive candidate experience? And before you answer, I just again like to throw open to the participants. If you have any questions, etc., please raise your hands or you do type in your questions. We will take your questions as before we close the session today. M, over to you. I think you're on mute.
Okay, let me try.
Yeah, that's better. I think.
One moment.
Yeah, there's an echo. I think you need to mute the other phone.
Yeah, so I'm going back. Sorry about that, because I lost my internet. Okay?
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
There's some echo.
I think I cleared it. It's clear now. Yeah. Yeah, so I think, I think it's almost semantics when we're talking about, selling a job or not. I mean, it's like, I think for candidates, if we can really, what a good salesperson does is they put themselves in the shoes of the consumer. And I think that's a really powerful exercise to really imagine what it's like from first interaction all the way to interview, what it's like to engage with your company. I find sometimes in very large organizations, right, people get really stuck on their individual role, but they forget that there is a whole ecosystem and there's a whole step of process and who's going to own that. And really good companies, it's when people actually step up to look at that whole experience that person is facing, especially as Shri pointed out at the beginning, when you're working with external partners, to make sure that the partners that you're working with on the external side are aligned with the values and practices and principles of how to treat people. In this way, I think there's just a couple things I want to point out, and we've already mentioned it. It's about standardizing the questions that you ask. So it was Neelam that said this first, that she always asks the same 3 questions in the same orders for that job. That's been proven across the board to be a very powerful tool to mitigate bias and also to just level the playing field. And so that makes it way more fair. And so as a candidate are asked in the same order, in the same way, and in the same amount of time, I think that's a practice that not only mitigates bias, but also leaves the interviewer ease, feeling respected and that it's fair. And then I think the other thing in terms of actually being in an interview, it's about listening deeply. Yeah, and being fully present in whatever step you're in. I mean, there is nothing worse. And I have heard this too many times, frankly, for somebody who's already gone through a lot of screening processes, and now they're in that key meeting with some of the leaders of their unit, and the people aren't even present. They're distracted on their phone. They're in and out. They're late, and it's like, being able to listen deeply is the most respectful thing you can do. That's not just true for hiring. And listening deeply isn't just about being present. It's about really hearing who that person is, what their needs are, and they will walk out of that meeting, they take the job or not, and they will feel that was a really useful and important experience for them. I think the other thing that I know that some organizations do is to be able to provide real feedback to candidates that do not get the job. I think that's another, to be really straight up, because a lot of candidates, they come to me and they're like, I have no idea like what happened. I spent 2 months in this process. It was an enormous amount of work. I called in my references and then just like nothing. And I was so, and so it's like making sure that if you have these processes in place and you have criteria and you rank that criteria and you do that before any candidate steps in front, much easier after the interview to say, well, okay, first of all, this is why we are selecting this candidate. And anytime any other criteria starts coming up, it's like, no, we call a red flag. That's very respectable to do that. But then for that candidate, if they want to have a better understanding of why they didn't get the role, to take that 5 to 10 minutes and have that conversation, I think is a really honorable thing to do, to serve that candidate and serve your brand.
Great. Thank you so much. And Neelam, again, getting to specifics, by your experience, from a candidate experience perspective, what are some traps that interviewers fall into when it comes to bias? You know, what are some questions or statements that reflect bias that interviewers do that may offend a candidate, or that may have a negative candidate experience? Any thoughts from your side on that? And what are some insights to the listeners, to the participants? What are some suggestions or advices that you have, considering most of them would be in the hiring process? What can they do about it?
So one of the very common biases that we have is that the moment you have a candidate who's a woman, all right, and the job requires a little bit of travel, the first question you want to ask them is, right, so, you know, who's in your family? How many children do you have? What will you do? Who will take care if you travel? I hope you understand this job's got a lot of travel. And, you know, how will you manage that? Well, that's very offensive, all right? So it's my choice. You've mentioned it in the JD that this requires 10%, 20%, 25% travel. And I think you can't discount the other person's ability to have made their choice before they've come for interview. Though I respect the fact that you've been open about it, but I think a better way of putting at it is that clarifying in the beginning that this job requires a certain amount of travel, which is about 10 to 12 days. I hope the recruiter made it clear to you, or I hope the other interviewers also made it clear to you that we are very, very clear that this happens. And then probably let the candidate respond and come up if she has or he has. He is never, I think it's always a she that we put this question. And the fact is, we never ask a man that, is it okay? It requires about 12% travel, right? So we assume that since you're a woman and you're married, you will have problems traveling, right? So I think discounting the ability of some of the other gender to make a choice as to what are the choices, you know, how is she taking care of it, and she's not read the job description is disrespectful. I think we should be able to. Secondly, the fact that if you are newly married, you know, assuming that you will go on maternity leave, all right, and asking questions relating to your family, I think some people probably cross the border there, right? What is your policy of enabling that person to work when she's off, right? What is your policy of ensuring that she's able to take care of both? That's a choice that she can make, right? Whether she wants to come back. But one of her common biases is that, oh, she's just been married for 2 years. I'm sure she'll have children this year, and let's not hire her. Even before, you know, as Shri said, as Ranga said, the moment the candidate walks in and you see that chuda or something in her hand and you ask, oh, when did you get married? I think, and most of our biases generally are towards the other person, right? So the moment you see a person with a certain, manifested religious belief, like probably a tika or probably a mala, I think immediately he's too religious for this organization. We are very forward thinking. But you see, he came in an interview wearing a Rudraksh mala, right? So certain things wherein we believe that because we know it all, all right? And because this candidate comes with a certain, because I come with a certain experience, I have seen this, and hence this is going to be true, all right? But I think the need is, Sri Vallabh, that I need to stop and think as a recruiter, and I think this has to be be an assisted activity. You see, I can't know what are my biases, right? But I know who are my recruiters in the organization, all right? Can I at least come alive as to the bias, are my, all the unconscious bias that I have, are my learned experiences. So my mother had a friend whose name was Neelam, and she was ditched by her, right? Is an experience that was my mother's. But if as a child I believe that anybody whose name is a Neelam will probably be very smart and will, you know, or who's from a, or she's from a certain place that that friend was, is a learned experience. You have to understand, is this your lived experience? Have you met a woman who's been married and had come and left you in between, didn't call back? You know, do you have those memories in your adult? Do you have that data in your here and now to make that call? So I think telling the leaders, and biases can be very small also. As I said, a Rudraksh Mala can be a bias. Any religious manifestation, any strong statement. Also, bias can be something that is threatening towards me. So, for example, I may because I am not very assertive, right? Hence, I'm a little biased towards people who are assertive, and I may just tell, you know, the candidate, oh, I find him too aggressive for this role. Wherein I think he was not aggressive, probably it was aggressive as a reporting manager for me to handle. All right, so that's something that very, very clearly come in the, and when you look and go back to that person's team, you will find that everybody is docile in the team. All 10 team members that you have are kind of please others and like other people and kind of a thing. So I think it's very important. Yeah, Em, you have a question.
Oh, no. I'm just saying I want to share something. You're inspired.
Sure. All right. So I'm saying,
I was putting my hand up.
All right. The only thing that I want to say is that you can't do carpet bombing when it comes to unconscious bias. I can't say that I will have 10 people, or let them put into a STAR technique training program. Let's use a green ball model. Let's tell them situation, you know, task. That can't
Action
happen.
result.
Yeah, no, it will not happen. You'll have to put them into groups of 5 to 10. You have to work with the metaphors. You have to work with their body. You have to work with them. What are their biases? And let them understand their biases. And let them come back to you. And these workshops don't work the same day. There are candidates who come after 2 months also. That Neelam, I had a realization. Now what do I do about it? So you have to understand, it's a wave. It will go on in the organization, and slowly your investment will come back.
Brilliant. I think that's great insights, Neelam. Em, you were saying something?
She wanted to share something.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share that, you know, sometimes bias shows up differently. We haven't really, you know, explicitly stated this, that sometimes bias shows up in experience. Like we have a preference, like that somehow experience always equals better. And it really depends on the job, right? So like Ranga's organization, okay, hiring a lot of PhDs, you know, experts holding intellectual property. Okay, like in certain jobs, absolutely, like we should be really clear on what is the amount of experience that is enough for that person to bring the expertise that they carry. And I want to give one example about this, which was a technology company that I was working with. And I remember sitting with their leadership team the first time I started working with them, and the entire leadership team was like gray-haired. So I was like a very big outlier in my late 30s, and I just observed that. And it was quite noticeable, because technology tends to be a really young, a younger industry. And so we were looking at some of the challenges they were facing, and that's what we realized. Like, wait a second, why does this middle-level engineer in this company, why does the job description say that they need 15 years of engineering experience? So I'm like, I'm not an engineer, but I want somebody on this leadership team to tell me how much engineering experience does somebody really need to be able to do this job, the competencies of this job well. And they really thought about it. They thought about it for some time. We didn't address it in that session, but they came back to me and they agreed that it was 5 years. So if you think about that, 5 years versus 15 years, they were hiring the wrong candidates, and it was really harming their company. They were missing this entire new cohort of innovative different thinkers in the tech space. So that once they could, but that was unidentified until somebody outside could point it out, that this, so it doesn't always have to be gender or something so obvious, although of course those things are there. It's often, you know, experience and education, and even like their specific job history, like how long they've worked in the industry. So when somebody hops industries, because by the way, women tend to jump industries more than men. Women tend to play different roles more than men, but women tend to be, the bias is that we expect women to have more experience for the same kind of a role. And so this is a really important thing to question. But again, you have to have these conversations before any candidate enters into the room. Once you've started interviewing and you haven't had these conversations to clarify what questions are we going to ask, what are we looking for, and in what order, then if you haven't done that, then all the bias will creep in and be unmitigated because we rationalize it. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Em. And I think we've started to get questions. Supriya has a question. So before we go ahead for the question, I would like to formally, get one last piece of anecdotes from each one of you, because we are at the hour, and I want to throw up some time for questions. India is a country where there are no legal implications, there are no laws that prohibit an interviewer from asking a question or from a candidate experience perspective. Whereas in countries like the United States, I'm not sure about Canada, but then a candidate can potentially take an organization to the court because someone asked about their marital status, someone asked about they having a background they spend some time in the prison, etc. So in the absence of that, maybe about 30 seconds per person, starting with Ranga, then Neelam and M, about 30 seconds each. In the absence of a legal framework, in the absence of legal provisions, etc., what can we do to ensure, as interviewers, what can we do to ensure that the candidate experience is topmost, and just through the experience they're able to sell the organization, sell the job, as Ranga said, in providing candidates the best experience and not getting into a trap. About 30 seconds each. Let's start with
See, basically, predominantly what we did very clearly, if you can see any employment form, we can see married, unmarried, or male or female. The first information, what we said, let us incorporate one more column for that. Today we are talking about, a lot of gender diversity, all kind of things. Let the person don't want to feel any bad about after by filling the application form. So that's the first step we took. I think it's really working very well.
Brilliant. Great. Super. Thanks. Neelam, what can we do generally to compensate for the lack of a legal framework? You're on mute, Neelam.
So I think feedback from the candidate as to what is that he didn't like, and I think firstly as M said, putting a framework as to what are the competencies that you need to, touch base and what order they should be. And there has to be questions that each person has to ask. And if there are questions which are zero tolerance, probably a feedback from the candidate as to were there any questions which were zero tolerance and where you were still, you still went through them, and probably addressing that in the organization.
Great, brilliant, thanks. Any note from you, Em?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said before, which is just standardize the questions.
Yeah.
And whoever's interviewing, stay on script. It doesn't mean you're not charismatic and a good salesperson who's super flexible. Design good questions and try them out. And of course, grow them and modify them as you learn and get better with working with your interviewer team, but standardize them, and then you won't have this issue.
Sure, great. Thank you so much. And I'd like to open up the panel. So Supriya, we have a question from Supriya, and it's about female candidate coming into interview. Supriya, it'll help us if you are able to tell us whom do you want this question to answer, or anybody is okay. The question is, if a female candidate is actually married for 2 to 3 years and is really expecting within 5 to 6 months of joining, then what should be the take on this? So, Supriya, this question is from Neelam. Yeah.
Okay, so are you saying that as an organization you have decided not to hire women who are about to have children or who should have children? If that's the take that you've taken, then you be explicit, and probably you want to tell that you don't want to have women who are in the childbearing age. But if you think that's wrong, and women in childbearing age and during maternity are equally productive as your other employees, it's just that see, look at today, all of us are forced in the home. We are all on maternity leave practically. But are we not working? We are working. We are productive. I work for Big Basket. Are you not ordering from Big Basket? Are we not tying up with the Uber and the Olas of the world to ensure that you are? So stay at home is a choice, is a benefit given by the organization. And having children is a choice that she's made. You can make it comfortable for her. All right, you can make it work from home for her. You can give her more flexibility. You can, and in today's world there's so many things that can happen. Are we not conferencing on a Zoom call? All right, we are talking, right? So there are so many things that you can do to take care of her, ensure that she's productive, she's happy. And believe me, those 6 months that she's not there, she'll be more happy, more productive when she comes back if you support her. Like for the child care system, right? Like, or most of the organizations have a crutch in the organization, right? So there are so many benefits that you will give to her. So I don't think hiring women of childbearing age and putting them through this question of you are married now, you will, and just when they enter the room and you decide, no, I don't want to hire her, is a bad thing. Until as an organization, you've decided not to hire women of childbearing age.
Sure.
I just want to add one story. I have a really good story that will turn this question totally around. So I was working with a law firm a couple of years ago, and I met with the partners of the firm, and they said to me, we need to fix this problem that we have because women are getting married and having kids, and then they're quitting. And it's a big problem for us. So I need you to come in and do women's leadership to help these women better balance work and life. Yeah. So that was the task until I asked, I was like, before I design a women in leadership program, I think I should talk to some of these women who are leaving this company. So please, do you allow me to do that? So I went and met with 10 different women from this office that had kids and quit the company. And they were not having a problem with work-life balance at all. In fact, they had babies and realized, I hate this company. I hate this culture of this organization. And I really, as a mom, now I have a different perspective on life, and I feel like I need to role model to my child what it means to do something that you care about. And I cannot continue to work in this organization that disrespects me so much. And so when I took that information back to the partners, it was like, wait a second, I don't think we need to fix the women. I think we actually really need to look at the culture of
that's right. Yeah.
To see why it's not that that women can't handle it, it's that women really don't thrive here. And so let's look at that. And and just speaking to my own personal experience, I travel like 50%. I've got 3 kids. My little girl was in like 12 countries before she was the age of 1. I was famous for breastfeeding on the job. And again, that's not a judgment of other women who decide to do something different, but there is conventional and unconventional. And so it's just getting to know the individual and respecting that there are a lot of individual choices that can be made that are conventional or unconventional. And it's just really what your company is looking for. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much, Aim. Very insightful. And I think we have Saudamini. I'm not sure whether it's a question or a comment, Saudamini. If it's a question, I would suggest I'll open the audio for you. But if it's a comment, that's fine. It's taken. If the companies take feedback from the candidates after interview to some extent, we can judge the transparency or whether the interview was done without bias, right? So would you want to, is that a question or is it a comment? I'm not very sure, Saudamini. And feel free to unmute yourself and ask if it's a question. In the meanwhile, I would like to move to Sudha. Sudha has a question. How do companies look at middle-aged candidates who are competent versus younger candidates? Who is this question for, Sudha? Is there any specific person you would want this question to be addressed to be addressed by? Or you're okay with anybody responding to this question? Sudha? Okay. Okay, I think anyone is okay. So, who would like to take this question? Ranga, Neelam?
Yeah,
and-
can I answer this
Please,
question?
please.
Because if you ask me, Sudha, I know my organization, people are working with us more than 20 years, 25 years. It's a being 100 years old company, DCM Shriram. And, how to manage these old age people, it's simple logic is that upskilling and enhancing the competencies. See, today, most of the Indian organizations like Birla, Aditya Birla, and Mahindra and Mahindra, you talk about DCM Shriram, and any other companies like Asian Paints, you talk about all these Indian grown companies, because they have longevity is very high. So what they're doing, how to manage the, the millennials, because of when you hire the people from the different campuses, we get all the millennials. So what we need to do, we need to make sure that all the gray haired people how to manage the millennials, because millennials will come with lot of expectation, lot of aspirations. They want to everything on a short, they want to complete. So but in the same way, we are also managing the gray haired people. Boss, you have to give a scope to the people to understand, listen to them first. Don't say that your ideas are not at all acceptable. Understand them, because that's what we continuously HR also focusing on very the change management agenda. We're continuously communicating to all the mid-level people. You have to listen to them first, give a scope to them. So then only all things will come up. In the same way, we're also telling all the millennials, hey boss, you also need to understand the gray-haired people, because we respect your expectations, we respect your opinions, but end of the day, you also need to understand the basics. So these are the things we need to. There is no guideline. If you want to follow 1, 2, 3, 4, things will move up. Absolutely not. It depends on the organization culture, how things will move up, the management commitment and HR commitment. HR also need to. Here, I would very clearly mention that HR has to drive this process as a catalyst, a change catalyst, because you need to bridge the gap between the millennials as well as the Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z. Because today's most of the organizations, as Neelam very said, because Big Bazaar, you can talk about any kind of retail firms, so IT firms. It's a big lot of rift is happening from the Gen X versus Gen Y and millennials. I think there is no fundamental guideline for that. We need to understand both the parties and come to common conclusion and make sure that all the Gen X guys, they have to enhance their competencies. HR has to play a very vital role. And you also Gen Z guys, millennials, you need to mindfulness. You need to manage them with a lot of emotions, because today's generation, they don't like emotions. See, if they don't like their manager, immediately they're quitting the job. For example, if 20 years back, if I joined the company, if I want to leave the company, I have to think twice. First of all, why should I leave this company? Even my parents don't okay. So that's a kind of balance we have to manage. So that's the reason today a lot of mindfulness is coming into one of the learning objective, and a lot of emotional intelligence is coming into one of the learning objective for all these younger generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ranga. I think 20 years back, if I had left a job, the first thing I would have got was a kick from my father.
Absolutely.
So I think this was wonderful, and my 2 cents before we close the session is that eventually it's about two things. As hiring people, as recruiters, we need to look at ourselves. Am I trying to make a selection in favor of somebody at the cost of somebody else? And so am I losing objectivity there? That's a question that we need to ask ourselves. Second is from an inclusion perspective, from a candidate experience perspective, if we have the mantra of universal respect, if I'm able to behave, if I'm able to ask questions and say things in a respectful manner, irrespective of who the candidate is in terms of gender, age, etc., that will take care of the candidate experience a lot. Ranga, yes, you have something.
Srival, here I just would like to tell wonderful tool we are implemented now.
Sure.
30, 60, 90.
90.
30, 60, 90. That is called candidate experience.
Right.
The moment people who completed 30 days in the organization, if you get to know the pulse of the candidates, you know what's missing in the recruitment process. Because 30 days typically they talk about, I'm not happy with the process, I'm not with the job, the role, what you offered to me, logistics, all these will come. Then the 60 days, once the same employee complete the 60 days, then he can talk about the organizational culture, whether am I liking my manager, am I liking my team, am I getting the right kind of KRAs, all the inputs. If the same employee completing the 90 days, then he will successfully engaging with an organization. That means, yes, I liking this job, this is not a parking slot. I'm absolutely fully engaged. Yes, I want to contribute. I want to stretch myself. So if HR people, if talent acquisition people could able to bring the difference between the 30, 60, 90 guys, I think business looking at HR talent acquisition people. Because today, those days have gone, sharing the attrition numbers. Numbers anybody can share. But what value you want to add in the business? You tell me, boss. This is a predictive analysis. I can damn sure that with next 30 days, these guys will leave. If talent acquisition or HR guys can able to bring the platform, I think business look at the overall the HR as a value added function.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think it was such a lovely, wonderful session. We are at the hour. I do not want to take away time from everybody. Neelam has another call to attend, so she has left. But then on record, I'd like to place, thank you so much, Neelam, M, and Ranganath for being there. It was wonderful, lovely insights, and it was a very holistic discussion. And I'm sure all the participants got a lot to gain in terms of insights. My only request to everybody, all the participants, would be to, please Google up our name of the company, Dimension 3 Global Solutions. And if you can leave a comment or two on how you felt about today's session as a Google review, it will help us a lot. And I really, urge you to take those 2 minutes to leave a Google review for us. Just search our name, Dimension 3, DIMENZION 3. You would have got email from Hema also. It will really help. And we will also send you a feedback form soon, and would like to hear how you feel about that. So Ranga,
Nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Nice weekend.
For a wonderful opportunity. Thank you guys for patience listening, all of us.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye-bye.